Welcome everyone, super excited to be here. As shared, we'll be having a panel discussing the Black digital protest, how to mobilize, influence and ally. The digital protest, what that means for the purpose of this event, is the actions and the impact that we can make if we cannot be outside in the front line. What can we do behind the scenes? What can we do in the workplace? What can we do in our network to really stand and be there for Black communities? We have an incredible panel coming up. And I'm going to allow each one of them to introduce themselves and the organizations they work out and the organizations they work for.
Hi, everyone. My name is Daisy Onubogu. I work with Backed VC, an early stage fund based here in London. We back exceptional founders that we think are building a future that we want to be a part of. Specifically, I focus on building communities that will help us source better, support our founders better, and in particular trying to recruit people to our communities that will help us diversify our deal flow a little bit and change the nature of who we're backing.
Cool. Claud?
Hi everybody, my name is Claud Williams. I am the founder and CEO of Dream Nation. We are a coaching and learn development platform. However, we do also operate as a social enterprise. So we do use the profits that we make from working with corporates to actually offer services to young adults who might otherwise not be able to access them.
Fantastic. And Anu?
Hi, I'm Anu Adebajo. I'm an investor with British Patient Capital, which is a commercial subsidiary of the British Business Bank, which is the UK government's development bank. BPC, we are LP investors into venture capital funds in the UK and Europe.
Awesome, thank you guys. We're going to go straight into it. So my first question is, can you share a moment with us where you've taken part in a digital protest and the impact that it has had? And that's digital process in terms of what that means to you within your organization or outside.
Okay, I'll bite. Yeah, I guess when I think about that term digital protest and I think about what can you do, from in front of your computer, what can you do with the wealth of knowledge and access available to you through the internet, I think about sort of previous occasions where I've sort of taken time to try and write something that I thought would, contribute to explaining to people who maybe don't understand it, what we mean when we say that, racism is systemic and that, events that happen far away, including a policeman kneeling on someone's neck, knowing full well how that will end, link all the way back to, how I'm treated by colleagues or how, someone is treated in their school by the headmaster and everything in between. And I think what's interesting to me about this moment is that in the past, when I've tried to explain that or write those words, it has been such an uphill climb to find anyone outside of, the Black community understand that or be willing to understand that, be willing to acknowledge that the world around them, even though it is broadly okay from their perspective, is actually so problematic that someone's suffering is almost guaranteed just as a status quo, as a basic standard. So I think that's been interesting for me, is the activity is the same as before. It's writing, it's talking, it's trying to share ideas, but the reception has definitely been different this time around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I would say kind of very similar. One of the things I'm trying to do is kind of be very aware of my position in this industry, and that various people are reaching out to me from institutions that don't really understand what to do or how to respond, and asking for my input. So I think helping them to frame, how they're going to talk about this and any action and statements that go with the action that they're going to put out. I think that's what I decided that I can do. And then I think, more widely, even not just in a, let's say, the VC industry context, it's I've decided to use my words to really lay out my experiences, to really lay out the facts and really lay out what action that white people and others who just don't understand what Black people have been going through, what they can do to really be allies. So yeah, I think it's been, and as Daisy said, it's been really interesting just to see how receptive people are being to that. And I think it's very much helped by the fact that we are all at home, and we are all kind of captive to the screen in front of us, and so that's really helped to kind of facilitate getting that information out and helping people be more receptive.
Yeah, and I'll say as well, like I've definitely taken, I guess, a little bit of a different approach to the whole situation going on right now. So I've been involved with quite a few, I guess, private conversations and private groups, like formulating plans and what needs to be happening next, as well as looking at how we can support each other moving forward. I guess another way which I've been involved with this for myself is just showing solidarity online. So sometimes it's as simple as showing that this is something that you stand against, and something that you want to see changed as well. But I'd say probably for me, the most important role that I've been playing is actually been just really supporting a lot of people that are more, I guess, at the forefront of this right now. So being there to help provide some mental and emotional support, and just making sure that ultimately the weight of this entire situation isn't weighing them down too much. So just being, I guess, a helping hand to those that need it has been one of the ways I've really been supporting this time around.
And I love that. And I think what everyone shared, there was a part where almost the education is on you to then provide that to, quote unquote, the oppressors. And I think, and that sometimes can be such a heavy burden to lift. And I know with all the trauma that's happening to our Black communities yet again, one of the kind of actions that I've seen shared a lot, and I think this was also shared in a Sifted article, was to really urge employers to ask first how they're, go to their Black employees and say, how are you coping? How are you dealing? How can we help? How can we show up for you? So actually, Claude, I would love to know more in terms of, if there's, for those that are on the call, to figure out the actions that they can take. What can the ecosystem do to be mindful of Black individuals, Black talent, Black funds, Black founders' well-being and mental health during this time as well?
Okay, so I'll just really say the main thing is just keep on learning. I think it's really important that people take the time to learn about their own biases, take time to really learn about what's happening in the world right now. And also, I think what's really important for all of us is to look at the positions that we find ourselves in specifically, and then looking at how the resources, networks, skills, connections, talents that we might have can be used to help actually make a change right now. So making a difference won't necessarily. It's more about finding what can you do to actually make this world a better place for everyone else.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's the mental health question as well is so interesting, right? Because I think most Black people, you get to a stage where you don't even notice that it's weighing on you anymore. It's like you're walking around with, like, I don't know, 80 kgs on either shoulder, but like, this is just life. That is what it is. And there's almost a strangeness in the first couple of times where someone's like, are you okay? Or how are you feeling? What's going on here? And you're like, I don't even know what to do with that. But it is important that that question is still asked. The first week or so of getting floods of messages from colleagues and friends being like, I'm sorry you're Black, are you okay? Do you want a hug? Was incredibly awkward for all involved, but was so crucial, because now this week in hindsight, I've realized how long it's been since I had any hope that anyone else can see this, apart from anyone who looks like me, that anybody else cares, that anyone cares that my week has been harder than theirs because I've been doing everything they're doing and been spending all my time wondering if life is always going to be like this or what I'm supposed to do about it. So I guess what I would say is, do it. Don't expect that you will get some perfect response to it. Nobody has a manual for how to cope with dealing with racism and dealing with people being sorry about racism. So the reaction might be whatever it is, but it's worth doing. Those check-ins are critical. If we can understand, in the context of COVID and coronavirus, how environments can make such a difference to your employees' mental health, and we know that we have to do things about that and come up with resources, you can apply the same rationale to dealing with this perpetual situation for years previous and years to come.
I think that that's so powerful. And I think, you know, I think for us, the week has been long, and it's so important that we're operating from a position of power and strength right now. We're really discussing actionables. And I know, Annie, that's something that's super important to you, if not everyone on this call, but also like when it comes to policies, where do we invest? Where do we hire? Where do we spend our time now as a community, as an ecosystem, to ensure that equality is something that's universal to all? And I know, Annie, within your experiences and the thoughts that you shared, you have some views on, I guess, where do we put that money now within the wider ecosystem? Do you want to elaborate further?
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's really important to kind of make a distinction, I think, in that this is nothing new for the Black community. What's going on is something that we've been dealing with kind of privately for you know, decades, centuries, and just getting on with it. As Daisy said, get your head down and get on with it, and you don't really examine the feelings. But obviously this is now new to everybody else. And so I think it's important to kind of make that distinction. And I think because of that, because more widely society didn't really understand what we were going through, a lot of the D&I initiatives that have happened in the past or have started in the past, they haven't really resulted in action. It's been a lot of words, it's been a lot of discussions, it's been a lot of talking, it's been a lot of conferences where everyone comes out and feels really good that they're going to do something, but it isn't anything that's really resulted in actual action. So I think, you know, because the reality is, so last year Diversity VC published some stats on a variety of diversity metrics in VC, and 3% of VCs were Black, 3%, and that is, you know, that is extremely low. That's the lowest of the groups. I think Asian were 12%, for example. So, you know, there's still a lot of work to actually do. The discussions haven't really changed much. So in terms of actual action, what I really want to see is, rather than statements, is firms kind of putting their money where their mouth is. Firms not using excuses anymore that the talent's not there or that they don't know where to find them. Firms actually just getting on with it and hiring. There are many, many talented people who come from the same backgrounds that others do in VC, who come from, you know, the same banks or consulting firms or tech companies or, you know, other backgrounds that VCs come from. And it's, the onus should be on the funds to say, we want to see this actually. So when we're using our headhunters, we say, actually bring us these diverse, this diverse pipeline of talent. And there are many, many groups now in the industry that are you know, targeting this kind of thing and are able to introduce funds to talent. You know, even YSYS being one of them. Any one of us on this this meeting can introduce people to talent. So I think there is no excuse. I think that's one. Number two, I think again, you know, putting your money where your mouth is and investing in diverse founders as well. That is key as well. And again, the pipeline is there. There are founders there. No one is saying that there are, you know, kind of a unending stream of founders, but there are certainly more than the one or two that get, or probably even one that get VC funding a year. You know, that's not right. So again, I think it's time for the funds to be proactive, to actually use their own initiatives to go out and to look for the talent, to hire the talent internally, but also to look for the founders, to link in with organizations that have been, you know, the organizations have been around and been trying to speak to the VCs for a long time. And some VCs have been really good and have been listening and have tried to implement them, and others have just never been bothered to enter that conversation. So I think it's time for everybody to take up that conversation, actually use action now. I think the time for words is over.
Wow, what a powerful statement. The times for words are over. I think the words that keep coming out is discuss, donate, diversify. That's the 3D. And if you remember anything from this session, please tweet that out. And I know
one thing.
Jump straight in.
Just one of the things that I'm so conscious of, and someone asked me this question, was like, I keep hearing, you know, actions matter, it's not words. And they're like, but I'm not sure what actions to take because I haven't been going out and acting racism consciously. So it's not like I can just be like, I'm just going to stop that. But everything else I've been doing, I don't understand, or it's unclear to me how that was leading back to this outcome. And I think that's something that's so important for people to understand, is that if you've been like marinated in a particular way of being, and you've just been minding your own business, trying to be your best self, but ultimately that's still been contributing to a system of oppression, then it's about being willing to go back and say, what are all of those seemingly innocuous choices I've been making? And how do those choices lead us back here? If you're an organization and you're saying, well, you know, we wouldn't have objected to a Black person being hired. We didn't, like, we left it open. We didn't restrict anybody from getting the job, but this is the outcome each time. Then go back and look at each piece of that process and ask yourself where the barrier was coming from, or where the assumption, you know, against was coming from, or where the assumption in favor of the dominant group was coming from. And so for me, investing is such a clear example of that. All of the truths you layer your thinking on, and all of the ways you think the investing process has to be run, examine each of those and ask yourself, where is it falling short? And it can be everything from who are the people, who are the sources you're prioritizing, sources of deal flow, and who are they sending to you? Because if you see 98% white men, then that's going to be what your portfolio looks like, no matter how well-intentioned or de-biased your process is. And then ask yourself, you know, what metrics you're holding a founder up against, or sorry, what ideas you're holding a founder up against when you say, you know, were they strong enough, or were they smart enough? And if you were premising that on, well, did they go to Oxford? Then you're already layering that on top of, well, who got to go to Oxford in the first place? And what does that mean? And so I guess the point of action is, it's not just donate and sort of sit there. Donation is great. And, you know, reading things is great, and writing things on Twitter is great about how much you believe those things. But if you know that everything you've been doing so far has contributed to upholding the system because that's how it was designed, no one's blaming you for it, but do something about that. Check all of your behaviors and undo whatever is causing the harm.
100%. It's about really applying the things that you learn, and that you begin to understand. And, you know, I think one of the key statements I've been seeing around by Angela Davis is that it's not enough to be, I'm not racist. You've got to be anti-racist. You've got to be bold about it. You've got to be loud about it. And so if you know that maybe you haven't been outwardly saying racist stuff, how can you really show up for the Black community? And there's ways of, like, whether that's volunteering, whether that's supporting programs. And so my next question is to you, Claud. I know, you know, you worked with YSYS on an incredible program to support 10 young Black men gain employability skills within the tech sector. And, you know, we see a lot of initiatives over the past few years, you know, really supporting women get into the sector, but it's such a rare opportunity, again, to see this for young Black men, specifically those under 25. Do you want to share some of the work and great success stories that come out of that, and ways that people can get involved?
Definitely. Okay, so yeah, I had the pleasure of working with you, Deborah, at YSYS, alongside the Mayor of London and Jolt as well, on an amazing program that was a pilot trying to get 10 young men into new careers in tech. It was an amazing experience, definitely, and a lot of those young men have now gone on to start their careers, which has been fantastic. However, what was really interesting while doing that project was just seeing what are the real struggles that they face. And a lot of time it's not to do with their skill or their ability, but it's a combination of a lack of opportunity or access, but then also some of that internal work. So them being able to see themselves in those type of roles, or having the confidence to even apply. Or in sometimes it's just having the right introduction. And it's so easy to forget that some of the things that we take for granted every single day because of the privileges that we all individually have, there's so many people that don't have that. And I think just becoming a lot more conscious of those type of problems and those type of barriers will go so far in helping us to actually create a more fair world. And in that world being more fair, we all benefit, because those young men, they all had so many fantastic ideas that they gained through having such a unique perspective on life that we simply don't have. And as long as those opportunities are continue being missed by them, then ultimately we all miss out. And I'll say I've also had the opportunity to work with quite a few other organizations over the years as well. So things like the Elite Foundation, or even just making myself available. And this story that I'm saying is not unique. Like, I've seen this happen for 10, 15 years at this point. And yeah, I really feel that there's a lot more kind of systemic change that really does need to take place in order for us to actually solve this issue.
I think as well the nuance in the UK when it comes to racism is also the intersection with class, and especially in an industry like ours, there is a real issue here, and I've seen some work being done, kind of looking at things like social mobility, but not really, not nearly enough. Hardly anything, and I think that's what makes it quite difficult for the industry at large to really take a look at itself, because actually, if you look at the backgrounds of most people who are in this industry, they by and large come from middle class and above, really. And actually, I remember being at a minorities event for people in the PE and VC world, and someone came up to me and said, actually, every single minority that they've ever met at these events has always been middle class, has by and large been a private school, and actually that compounds the problem. That's intersectionality. It compounds the problem, especially in an industry like this, which often relies on certain types of relationships. Who do you know that can provide funding as a potential LP or co-invest? Who do you know that has a good network with other kind of well-to-do people that can provide something additional to the fund, or something additional in terms of network? And that is a real problem. So, Claude, I think it's really right to kind of highlight that there are privileges that that many of us benefit from, even within the Black community, that compound, and the lack of those privileges compound the problem for many more Black people, and prevent them from really being able to gain a foothold and to thrive and to really rise within the industry.
It's so intersectional, and I think that's something that having that mindset, having that lens when you look at things is super fundamental. I know at YSYS a few months ago we kind of pushed forward a campaign called Where Are the Faces, to really encourage the Mayor of London's entrepreneurship programs to take that intersectional approach and to really scout and support Black female founders. And a few of us on this call and in the wider YSYS community wrote an open letter which got us to City Hall, where we could then put forward our suggestions to Rajesh Agrawal, and that led on to many kind of initiatives following afterwards to support Black women in entrepreneurship. But that took a lot of mobilization. It took a lot of writing letters. It took a lot of grassroots influencing to really kind of have an influence on policy. And I know, Daisy, that's something that you're super passionate about in terms of building communities, building new infrastructures that are inclusive by design, changing and influencing policies. And you recently took part as well in kind of the Future Fund, really advocating for that to be more open and diverse. I wonder if you could share kind of your thoughts on that. Be super interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in any sort of fight to change the world or attempt to rewrite the world, we all have sort of dual roles. You are both yourself as sort of a citizen, and then also yourself in relation to the work you do or the levers you have available to you like that. And I think even as we're thinking, how can I do my HR function in a way that's anti-racist, or my investment function in a way that's anti-racist, or whatever else you do professionally? You can also think, what else can I do as an individual, as a citizen? What other levers do I have access to? And that's when we have to start thinking about how to target those other areas that are separate to the work that you do on a Monday to Friday. How to affect how policing works, how to affect how the criminal justice system works, how to affect how media portrays Black people, etc. So thinking about policies and the policies that contribute to how, what the Black experience is from, moment of birth all the way through is an important part of this also, right? And then when I think about that way, not everything will be available to you, but, writing to your MPs on a particular issue because it's highlighted to you is action. So, investing in organizations, grassroots organizations that will do research into a particular area, or will, actively work with that, or volunteering for them. But I think the reason I always talk about policies is just because we forget so much, like how the gap between our individual actions and the whole system and what's happening. And so it's not enough for just you and your immediacy to improve things, because I don't know how many people we can even count on the side of the anti-racists right now, but it's probably still a minority of society, right? So if there are not that many of us in here, then we need to make sure that everything we're doing, we multiply impact. So work in your immediacy, in your life, in your family, work in your workplace on what you can do and how you can rewrite any policies there that are keeping people out, and then work as a citizen to think, what can I impact beyond the private sector? How can I make sure governance, justice, media, et cetera, is also changing for the better? And then I guess on the final point, the reason sort of words like systems and policies are going out so much is to always remember what are the things that don't even need people. What are the types of racism that don't need people to sort of to activate them? So what are the written or unwritten rules about who can come into a place or who can't come into a place? What are the written or unwritten rules about who can get funding or not get funding? What are the written or unwritten rules about who can get access to a certain kind of school or not? Because those are the things that don't even require a person to have hate in their hearts. It's just, well, it's the rules, it's the policy, not our fault. And so I think it's important to keep thinking, what do we need to undo just outside of our own individual actions, and think about it that way. You, your family, your friends, your workplace, and your society.
Fantastic. It's network after network, and we have a role to play on the micro and the macro levels. But actually, one of the questions I just saw come through is that we're doing all of this influence and we're doing all this mobilizing, we're carrying this burden, we're making change. But what if you're operating in a space where they don't want to learn? So you might be the one Black employee within the engineering team. You might be the only Black female founder that they've invested in a portfolio. How then can a Black individual then protect themselves or move the needle in a place where they don't want to learn and they don't see the benefit of that?
I think it's such a hard one, right? But I think this is where support networks come in. This is where community comes in, because you're only as strong as the energy that you have. And if you're on your own and it's just getting depleted from you by being surrounded with hate, or even just passive apathy towards hate, that's gonna be hard to sustain. I think that's where making sure that you have other people, and that might mean that you have to make sure you build a network that is outside your employees and it's outside your workplaces. But if you are the only Black founder in your portfolio, make sure that you also have your tribe of other Black founders who can support you and can give you energy, but can also give you tips on what they've done and how they figure it out through. So I think there's sort of two things there. Is one, make sure you have people to rely on, even if that means you have to build networks and communities outside of your primary place of work or where you normally spend time. And two, it's make sure to keep track of your privilege as it's rising, so when you have enough that you can start to spend it. That's the way I always think about Blackness or any kind of otherness, is like, first you're on the outside, then your mother tells you have to work 10 times as hard to get half as far as anybody else will, then you do that, and then you end up in positions of relative privilege. And it's important to note when that's happened, so you can start to spend some of what you've banked and speak up, knowing that you're not at risk of losing privileges or losing your job because you're worth too much to them now, or that sort of thing. So build your support network so that you survive that journey and you keep moving up, and make sure that you're tracking where you are so that when you're in a position to spend some of your newly earned privilege to change things, to change the system, to pull other people up behind you.
And I think it's also, really important to say the education of others is not your responsibility. You don't need to do that. That's, if you have the energy to educate people and you're feeling generous, then absolutely, feel free. But it's not your responsibility. I think as Black people, we've carried a lot, and this time is a lot, and it's bringing up a lot, and we are carrying the burden of looking at our own experiences, and also of helping others in our community, with theirs as well. And there's just a lot on our plate right now, so it's not your responsibility. If you want to point them to some things, fine. If they're not willing to learn, then I think absolutely it goes to what Daisy said about just make sure you have your support network elsewhere. If you're choosing to still remain, if you have to still remain in that environment, and there's nowhere for you to go, you can't leave. This is your fund or your organization or whatever. then, but yeah, it's not your responsibility. Everyone should be taking responsibility for themselves. I think there's so much information out there now that there is kind of no excuse anymore for ignorance and kind of no excuse for not wanting to learn, because there is an abundance and people have made it so easy. There are literally, there's a resource which is bit.ly/anti-racism resources. That's simple. There's not much, it can't get much simpler than that. So if people don't want to learn, that's kind of on them. And of course, it's going to be really awful being in that environment. But then it's just imperative to get that outside support.
So building communities, lifting as you climb, looking after your well-being, and signposting people to the myriad of resources around anti-racism. Super important. But it's almost this person that's asked this question. It's so important that as Black individuals, that we are in positions of psychological safety, right? And my heart only goes out to those that are in organizations where they don't feel safe. And so my question, I guess, goes back to you, Claude, in terms of, are there any tips or ways that we can really protect ourselves and build an armor when it comes to our mental well-being and our muscle strength as well?
Yeah. Just want to really first echo Annie's point. It's not your responsibility, first and foremost. Like, it's great if you can and you want to, but do not feel that that's your burden to carry. The next thing that I just really would like to recommend, especially to any Black people that are watching the stream right now, is that I am a huge advocate of counseling and therapy. I can say with a lot of confidence after working with so many people for so many years, is that if you've reached the age of an adult, if growing up as a Black person in the UK, then you have more than definitely experienced some level of trauma in your life. And working with a talented and skilled professional through those type of traumas, it can do so much for you. So yeah, I would say take the time, make those investments in yourself, and you really will not regret it.
Mm-hmm. And organizations, if you have Black employees or those from underrepresented backgrounds, make that investment in them, right? It's all about attracting diverse talent, Black talent, but it's also about retaining that talent and creating a space where they can thrive and grow. I'm excited. I'm glad that it's taken an 18-minute, 40-second video for us to realize that Black Lives Matter and equality should be at the heart of everything that we do. But I think as a tech ecosystem where we have platforms to mobilize and share information through grassroots WhatsApp communities, platforms like Kwanda, technology and verification platforms like Serale, there is hope. I think us even having this panel or this event, even existing, I'm hopeful. And I think now we've got to move, right? And now we've got to have more transparency. I want to see organizations releasing data on, like, there's the number of Black employees we have. Not only that, how many Black employees actually applied, got through the first stage interview, rejected, and then have a look and say who was doing the interview process, what platforms we were doing. Like, let's get that granular. So my question is to actually all of you in terms of, what do you think, it's a big question, but what do you think the future looks like now for Black communities?
I think I'm feeling optimistic. I know I've said we had this chat before. I'm feeling optimistic because this does feel different, and it feels like that people are a lot more engaged, are willing to listen to the stories of Black people and actually believing them, and not being ready to counter with, well, I've experienced that too, so it can't be racism, or are you sure that really happened? That doesn't seem to be happening right now. By and large, there's always going to be the odd people that go down that line of reasoning, but it just feels different. So I'm really hopeful. But I think, just to kind of follow on from what you just said, Deborah, about, publishing things, I think things like publishing stats, super useful. I know in the US, companies are being encouraged to pull up and to release the diversity stats of their organizations. And that's been really illuminating, not least because when some of the firms are doing it, it releases former employees and current employees to actually say, wow, interesting you're saying this, because my experience there was, and it's starting a conversation. I think also the flip side of that is KPIs. And even if you acknowledge that the numbers aren't great now, publish some KPIs about what you want to achieve, whether it is employees, whether it is your portfolio companies, investments, publish some stats to be held accountable, and make them public so that people will hold you accountable. I think that's really key. And just to kind of maybe touch on one or two other things that I would like to see, in the same way that many VC funds invest in accelerator programs, just as a way to be able to see the deal flow that comes through them. I would love to see that same thing happening, for them to be investing in the various programs that work with underrepresented and diverse talent. Do that same thing, invest in someone like a YSYS, invest in other types of companies like that. So you can, as a way of saying, do you know what, they work with a whole range of people. This is a way for us to see the talent and get access to that talent. So I think there are ways that people can be creative, and I really hope to start seeing some of that coming through and seeing some of that action.
100%.
Yeah, I feel like Anu came up and like stole all the good points, and like the rest of us are supposed to like fend for scraps. But to echo that,
sorry.
I think it's, you know, it's all about outcomes now and working backwards from them, right? And you're absolutely right when you say that this feels different, because, you know, I've cried before, but I've cried alone, or then, you know, cried with my Black friends, and I've made my peace with not bringing it up, you know, not to like harsh the vibe or change the agenda or try and force an agenda, but it feels like it is genuinely on the agenda now. So it's about making sure that momentum results in outcomes. And that's the thing to always use as the yardstick. So, you know, like Anu was saying, like, know where you're starting from, be willing to acknowledge the status quo and your part in it. And as an organization, that can look like, what's our hiring? What does our workforce look like? What's the breakdown? As a fund, that can be, what does our portfolio look like? What's the breakdown? You can't move forward if you don't own where you are. So doing it publicly, to the extent possible, and then setting yourself stretch goals. We already know how to change things. We're literally in the industry of disruption. We know full well what the process is. We just now, for whatever reason, have been unwilling so far to apply it here. But now we do that. Know where you are, know where you want to get to, and set yourself, you know, incremental sort of like inflection points that will show you whether or not you are progressing. And then, you know, at the same time, when we're thinking about initiatives, let's think about outcomes and sort of what we need to undo. So Anu's 100% right about investing in early stage, sort of first money in checks for Black founders, because when you think about it, again, applying your systems thinking lens to it, you can see, well, if it's true that Black founders are less likely to have access to any sort of friends or family capital, because that doesn't really exist, and you don't have concentrations of generational wealth in Black communities. So no friends or family rounds to validate your idea and gain any traction. But then at the same time, bias and structural barriers means you're far less likely to ever get investment, you know, just because people have faith in you. Institutional money is only going to come in when you can like beat them over the head with, look how amazing my metrics are. So you can, you know, forget the fact that I'm Black and I don't look like I'm supposed to belong here. You put both of those things together, then you're like, okay, this is why we're not seeing the volume of entrepreneurs from these communities, from these backgrounds that we want to. So do something about that. Invest into an angel syndicate or into some sort of pre-seed fund that's focused on Black founders. And then, you know, you'll up the concentration. And by the time you're thinking about that further stage along, whether you're seed or whether you're A, whatever, there'll be more to look for. And your newly shiny de-bias process will mean that you give them a fair shake, and we'll see change. So use outcomes as your lens to examine any existing processes or anything in your environment, and use outcomes to guide your plans and your process for how to change.
Definitely. And yeah, from my perspective, I think it's really great that we have all this external change happening in terms of the attitudes of everybody else changing. But what I feel most optimistic about is actually what's happening on the inside, like within our own community. I'm starting to see there's been a lot more support between people. And I think whether that's to run businesses, social enterprises, charities, or even just being that emotional support for each other. And another great thing that I'm seeing is like so much more collaboration. And I think if we can continue to take this mentality forward, so it's not just while things are as difficult as they are now, but even when things start to look brighter or improved, then I think that's really going to open up a lot more doors for us. But I guess the one other thing which I'm starting to see, which I'm really happy about, is there seems to be a lot less kind of hero worship, essentially, in a sense of it's very often that we'll see the same faces all the time, winning the same awards or getting funding for this or getting this opportunity or whatever. But what seems to be happening now is that we're looking beyond those sort of things and actually looking at not just getting the tokenistic people, but actually getting everybody involved and looking at all the talent and ability that's available within our community right now. So yeah, that's what I'm feeling most optimistic about.
Oh, that's absolutely beautiful. I love it. I love seeing all the collaborations. I think we're moving as a collective, we're moving as a co-op, which is fantastic. And I think for those on the call, that are listening, just thinking, what can I do? Often when I look at individuals that are non-Blacks, I think they go through this process where they become aware about the situation, and then they have to move to accepting it, right? It's real, it's here, it exists. And then it's about actioning. And that action can sometimes mean that they've invested in therapy for their Black employees. It might be that they've funded an angel syndicate that's going to be for Black founders. It might be that they've hired their first kind of Black individual into their VC company. Like, we're beginning to see those actions, and I think anyone that's on this call, think about what that long piece of systematic work that you're going to do to get to that point where actually you are a real ally and a vocal ally. Here at YSYS, we've launched something called the YSYS Advocates Community, really inviting groups of change makers that are passionate about ensuring that diverse communities and Black talent more within that are able to show up in spaces, thrive and grow. And so if you're someone that's looking to learn more about that and how you can contribute to an ecosystem where equity is for everyone, please do join. You can go onto our website. It costs to be part of the community. It costs less than Starbucks or Pret. So whatever your favorite drink is, and really get involved in the conversation. And so my final question before we get onto the Q&As, and the website, if the website is thisisysys.com, so go onto our website. It's on the tab at the top. It says advocates, and just click through. But yeah, my final question to the panel is, I guess, share with us maybe one thing, one action that those that are listening on the call today can make to make a difference.
I'd say write down what you are responsible for in your workplace. What is it that you do? And then underneath that description, write down between 1 and 3 ways where either the thing you do or how you do the thing contributes to racism or contributes to exclusion. Describe your work and force yourself to actually figure out, because it's not that hard once you pay attention, 1 to 3 ways your work, your output, or your way of working contributes to exclusion. Decide what you're going to do about it.
Yeah, good. I think educate yourself, yes, but to stop the education being just a self-development, as we talked about, I think then you need to transition into using that education to call out racism when you see it, call out the unhelpful practices in your organization, call out the things that your groups of colleagues or friends or networks in the industry are saying or doing, and that actually are not right, and are exclusionary, or are racist. Educate yourself, and then you take responsibility to call it out, and help take the burden off Black people who so they don't have to be the ones to be doing it alone anymore.
Okay, I really should not have let myself go last because all the good points are gone. So I guess the last thing I can really say is going back to my earlier point of just take the time to learn. Like I said before, learn about your own biases, learn about what's really happening in the world around you right now. But then also really learn about how you personally best can actually impact the situation, and then go from there.
Amazing. I think we're a bit early now.
I think the next thing starts at 4, so.
Yeah, but yeah, if you haven't become an advocate, we do invite you to join the community, join the conversation. Let's drive change. And I think, we're going to move into wrap up. And if we'll get you all your Q&As ready, and we'll get into hopefully a really thought-provoking conversation afterwards. Thank you, everyone.
Want access to more CogX videos? Subscribe now for free at cogx.co.